A very good morning to all. On behalf of KRVIA, I would like to extend a warm welcome to Sarika Shetty and thank her for taking the time to be here today. Crafting transformative spaces, a collective journey shaped by shared beliefs and evolving trajectories, is an attempt to portray a few of SJK Architects' milestone works completed in the last decade, expressed through unique thoughts and philosophies, engaging processes, and meaningful collaborations to create crafted built environments that are immersive and transformative. Memory and emotion drawn from cultural histories, geographical contexts, and spatial interpretations play a pivotal role in the making of a collective practice's shared beliefs to co-create by establishing connections with nature, the built form, and oneself, thus fostering a sense of identity, belonging, and well-being. Sarika is a partner at SJK Architects along with Shimul Javeri Kadvi, Vaishali Mangalvedkar, and Roshni Shivsagar. Founded in 1990, SJK Architects is a Mumbai-based collective of 30-plus built environment professionals working with clients and collaborating across the country. They design spaces that are meticulously crafted from a study of climate, culture, history, and technology, each unique to the place and its people. Sarika joined SJK Architects in December of 2001 while still completing her BA at KRVIA, and there has been no looking back since then. With 20-plus years of rich experience, Sarika's work cuts across multiple scales, building typologies, diverse sites, and clientele. She is passionate about cultural histories and believes in an architectural practice of contemporary idioms guided by the past. Over the years, Sarika has led several award-winning projects at SJK Architects, setting benchmarks in context-driven, sustainable design in the country and across the globe. With that, I will now hand over the mic to Sarika.
Good morning. I hope everyone is awake. I'm just going to tend towards noon soon. Okay, thank you for this opportunity to everyone at KRVI. This is coming back to my alma mater after a very long time. Just to give you all a little thing, I think I was in this hall in 2002 while receiving the gold medal from the university and the BG Bhatt Gold Award from here. And I think I'm entering this hall after that long. Of course, had come for the 25th year anniversary that we were celebrating in 2017, and that was a really nice one, and a lot of memories. Actually, this is where my beginning was, and now we just see this journey and circle back from where the beginning started. So I think what I'm going to do today is, talk about both the practice as well as the creation of this practice. We at SJK Architects today are a collective practice. We are over 35 built environment professionals, and we build across the country. What I'm going to cover today is few of our landmark projects which we build across the country, and this ranges across the fabric of history, culture, and deeply rooted sites. So there are three things that I'm going to talk about, which is very much ingrained in the way the practice practices, believes in, and these are the ideologies that really form what the practice is about today. One is craft, which is really the amalgamation of what the mind does with the hand. The other is culture, which is all of our shared beliefs and something that's deeply rooted in the way we work. And of course, collaboration. And all of this comes together in the manner that we all collaborate together. None of the buildings that we build is an individual's effort, it's a collective effort, and that's what architecture on the whole world over as a practice is. I think the media has made it so much of a master architect aspect that that's not true. It just takes an army of people to really put this together. It's not one individual. So this is just a little example of starting with nature. I'm very inspired by nature, so just showing all of these three things, craft, collaboration, and culture, in the idiom of nature, on how honeybees create. They are very, very well networked hexagonal pods, which are multi-purpose. They store their honey, they breed their babies, and it's highly crafted. So it is a craft of what the collective is able to do together to produce this. And all this finally leads to what a collective is able to do. I'm going to dive deep into now some of the projects. The first one that I'm sharing, I'm just going to share projects only from the last 1 decade. The practice is 33 years old. I joined the practice in 2001, immediately after my thesis here, and it's been 22 years at the practice now. So sharing works only from the last 1 decade. This is from roughly 2012 onwards. This first building that I'm showing you is Nirvana Films in Bangalore. So what I'm also going to do is keep adding anecdotes of how projects come in also. This is another project called Yamini, which is a showroom for home furnishings that we have done in Bangalore near the Alsur Lake. Now the urban fabric of the Alsur Lake is actually identical looking homes designed from the 1980s, and every single home looked the same. The client, which is Synergy Lifestyles that runs this furnishing company called Yamini, came to us to change the fabric of that home that they bought, and that was completely converted into a showroom. So what we did was kept the fabric of the structure the same and changed it for something which is for home furnishings. The project was actually very well received, and Nirvana Films, who reside in Bangalore and their studio is practicing out of Bangalore, entered this space, and what they really loved about the space is this entire scooping of a staircase and the light that falls in. The products of Yamini are very colorful. They are into the home furnishing industry, and what they experienced in the showroom was that the protagonist was the product and not the architecture. The architecture was really simple, and it was all about the light that really streamed through. And from there, what we got was, we got an email from Prakash Verma, who is the director of Nirvana Films, a very, very highly acclaimed film director, and somebody who's won a lot of Golden Star, it's called, right? The Lion, Golden Lion. The Golden Lion, which is a European award. And what it said was, they are highly creative people. They like spaces that will be no fuss. Very simple, very low in maintenance. They can think from anywhere. They don't need spaces to ideate. They can think while walking on the stairs of a flight. Or they can think in non-formal spaces. So you don't need spaces that need to be covered and closed. And it needs to be a building that they can grow with and they can live with, and they don't expect a building that is going to be very highly meticulous in terms of how it's secured. So these are very, very big brief that comes to us, and this was not even a call. This was directly an email after going to Yamini and writing this email saying that they were clear who they wanted to go with and why they were coming to SJK. And this was the brief that was a part of the first email. And from there, so this is Nirvana Films, a very highly creative bunch of people who run Nirvana Films. Everything happens in terms of ideation in Bangalore, but everything else that happens is all across the country, inclusive post-production in the Mumbai studios. These are some of their older works. You may be very well acquainted with them. Incredible India, all ads, all hutches, Vodafones. Some of very human-centric and cutting-edge films that they actually make. So this was for a bunch who was highly creative and wanted this space that was highly creative that will help them think out of the box. This site was in Indiranagar, a corner site on the southwest. Indiranagar in Bangalore, if most of you all know, is a highly residential area. And before this, they actually occupied a little bungalow which was designed by Shahrukh Mistry, and they were using that as an office. So their experience before this was not a formal office at all. It was always a bungalow converted into an office. This was the first time they were venturing into a studio space for themselves. Now when we build, we start with the basic aspect of the site, its orientation, the climatic conditions. And what we got here was a site which was open on the south and the west, which is not the bestest directions to have. Our north and the east, which was the best directions, was actually with peering neighbors right on the sides, and these were residences. So when you were building a building like this, you then ought to respect the privacy of the residents when you are a commercial studio right in the neighborhood. This is what the skyline of Indiranagar is. Hardly about G+2 buildings, and ours is about the G+3 with the terrace, which is very active, very green. To our south is the Indiranagar Park. So at the bottom over here is the Indiranagar Park. And we had a lovely mahogany tree and a lovely copperpot tree and a complete park right at the bottom here. Now what you see here is the adjoining property on the north and on the east is so close. The bylaws of Bangalore then and even now are in terms of setbacks what you get. So this is a typical Bangalore plot, 60 feet by 40 feet, roughly about 2,400 square feet. And with all the setbacks what you get really is just a rectangle of 12 by 15. Now what you do with this building is something like you actually take a spine which you skew and you create a staircase which becomes the fulcrum of the building, a space which is for interaction, a space which becomes a courtyard in a way which is suffused with light. Now when you cannot do a courtyard and you cannot work around the courtyard and you need to do a multi-story building which is of course only 3 levels high, what do? So this is what we did with it. We broke it through the center as a skewed spine and created these 4 quadrants. And these 4 quadrants kept ebbing and swelling depending on what every floor required as a function. The first floor is largely for auditions, so they have a lot of walk-ins who come in for auditions, a lot of post-production areas, caretakers, admin accounts, all of that. The second level is fully for production, which is where all the ideation happens. And if you see over here, you'll see on these levels, we have in the corner like an open dining and an open conference space. So we don't even have closed door conference areas in this building. I'll just quickly run through this. So this is how the spine cuts through, and it cuts through with the staircase that overlooks and brings in light to all the internal spaces. That's the section of how the spine works, and the staircase leads you from one floor to the other. It's a linear staircase. You wind around it on the level 2, and this is how the staircase cuts through. The staircase is open riser with light that's streaming down through and through right to the ground floor. And what we did for this whole thing is once we got the plan clear, we had a skewed center, we had 4 quadrants, and the 4 quadrants evidence were based on the functions. What was really important is how do you treat now your facade. And this was a very interesting journey that we had, where we always start with things when you're ideating something. It is always going to be a lot of trial and error. It's not going to be something that you're going to do in the first go always right, and that's been the journey of this project. Because the material that we chose to do this was something that was never used in India at that time, neither is it used really now also. So what you see on the left is a picture where we tried the facade with a wooden shutter, and we tried with a white shutter. We were clear that we did not want to do something which was wooden, because that was not something as a language that we were wanting to adopt. We wanted something really light. And what you see on the right is these white shutters. Now what these white shutters are, they are series of, so what we did with this building is the facade, you see these 3 levels, you see the terrace which has projection space. They actually watch movies on the terrace, they have their parties on the terrace, and a lot happens on the terrace. So coming back to the facade is a series of fixed glass and these movable walls. So what we did was the idea of the wall and the window was reversed in the project, where the wall became the fixed glass and the window became the wall became the window. So it completely reversed between the glass and the openable shutter. Now what you see here is this mechanism that actually was deep thought of on how to go about this, and each shutter, what you saw in the earlier slides, are white acrylic shutters. So all of us must know what Korean platforms are, right? Now Korean is again like photocopy and Xerox. Korean is the name of the brand, it's not the name of the material. The material is solid acrylic surface. And what solid acrylic surfaces were used then 10 years ago was only for kitchen countertops. It was never used in the external scenario. What we thought of doing was taking that material and veneering the shutters with that material, creating really lightweight shutters so that 4 of these shutters could work in tandem with a connected handle that became the railing. And we worked out a mechanism that actually connected them, had the stay as well, so that you could open them at various different degrees. So this building literally uses no electricity. During the day, you have complete daylight in the space. We have no air conditioning in any of these spaces, neither now, 11 years down the line. They haven't equipped their spaces with any electricity. Of course, we were fortunate to be in the climate of Bangalore. So all we had to make sure was to be able to modulate the wind and cross-ventilate every space. And to do that, these shutters would open at various different degrees, 15, 45, 60, 90. So you could control, so if there's a very windy, rainy day, which is what Bangalore gets on a daily basis, you can modulate it and make sure you get the wind only to the level that you need. So these shutters were made in Bombay, in a fabricator's workshop right here in Worli. And what we had to ensure was that each shutter doesn't exceed 60 kilograms. Now to do that, it means the engineering of the shutter from the inside had to be worked out with materials that would be light enough. So it was an aluminium framework with a marine ply skinning, and then on top of that went this material which is just 6 mm, and it is a recyclable material. You can buff it over the years, and now after 11 years we are going to buff it, like in the next week this process is going to restart. So the projects don't end where they end. After people have occupied it, projects grow with the with the way occupancies grow, and projects need that sort of caring, and this material, though for it being the first time, has fared fabulously well to be able to last the last 10-12 years without even yellowing. So we were at the start very concerned about the kind of UV rays effect that this material would have, but fortunately none of that happened. This building really looks fresh and nice even now. So coming together to the nuances of how this happened, this shutters got created in Bombay with one fabrication unit, and it got installed and commissioned in Bangalore with our carpentry team over there, and then we did all the trials and errors to do this mock-up. So can you see over here, this particular thing, it goes behind the handrail, and it's like a scissor like this, and what these holes are for is to enable you those degrees of opening. So it's like a stay. We call it a pavan kadi over here, the catch that you have. And that's the stay that enables you modulate it at any degree that you'd like. This is how it looks. The reason it has these facets on top is so that we could get some play of light and shadow as you see the building, with the moving sun on the south. These are the spaces as seen from the inside. So what you see as glass is really what the wall is. And what you see as the window is in a way the wall, which becomes the white surface. So it's the idea of the wall and the window reversing as the opaque and the transparent. So the earlier space was the producer space, that's Sneha Aite. This is the director's space, which is abutting the southeast corner, looking at the Indranagar Park on one side. You can see the golden lion right there on that table there. This is the production space on the second floor, and it's a long space where at least about 12 creative individuals who are on the team work out of. Again, this building has no false ceilings. We believe in an architecture where you can actually make sure that you're able to optimize the heights. These come with bylaws where you had to build only up to 11 meters. What that means is that you have very restricted floor-to-floor height. Now, beyond that, if you start putting false ceilings, it's not going to work for the space. Now, what you see this space is, it's actually only about 2.95 meters, but it doesn't feel so at all because of the way the windows have been articulated into the space. That's the dining space right in the corner, the earlier one. Sorry. This one is the dining space, which is towards the northwestern corner. This is the spine like you see it. You see on the top the light completely piercing through. On the right side is the production space. On the left side in this corner is the conference space. And this is the space where they all meet and ideate. So you can see what we did there was like a blackboard wall with a chalkboard calendar. So that becomes an aspect of how they work with the permanency of that wall, but with the impermanency of schedules and discussions that happen there. So very little gestures, a lot of furniture over here was, used back from scrap markets and refurbished to bring them back to life over here. The spine you saw was right above over here. And that's open on the south, while on the north we had these neighbors and we couldn't afford to close that completely because that was the direction of wind. When we start these projects, climate does form a very, very important role, and hence making sure how your wind movements work becomes very important. Again, a lot of modules on how you can work. So that's a staircase landing with a double height space, and you have the neighbors right behind there. So it had to be a solution which was allowing wind in, is very light, is a contraption that is as tall as 20 feet high, which is 6 meters high, can open in tandem and can open together, can modulate the wind and allow for it, and is light enough. So what you see over here, these are all models that you see on the right. There are scaled models, and then we do mock-ups, and then we actually make sure that you can work this entire thing in tandem and make this happen. So that's the northern elevation, and you see this aspect of how these louvered shutters work. These are made out of old Burma teak. We had to be very, very careful in how we use the old Burma teak because the material was very limited on what we could get. And you see this in plan, if you see on the bottom over here, that's the way each one of them interlock and interrebate. And so these 4 conditions that you see is basically conditions at various different levels. You either have the wood to wood rebated, you have the acrylic to wood rebated, acrylic to acrylic rebated. So these are basically, a lot goes into making a project. At the end we do only see pretty pictures, but what goes into it is taking that idea and that thought and making that work for every single aspect, whether it's climate, whether it's maintenance, whether it's operations, or whether it is longevity of that detail. So these examples are purely to just give you all an idea on what goes into making these elements. And these elements then form the part of the whole of the project, and that's what makes the project. So this is how you see the screen from the inside. That's from the second flight of stairs. That's the height that you really perceive. And right on the top, on the left-hand side image, you see the skyware, the skylight that's completely suffusing light into the center. Just few more pictures of how the staircase leads you right on the top to the terrace. And even in terms of lighting, of course this lighting may seem very crude now. For 11, 12 years down the line, now technology has changed so much in lighting that you can do it very differently. But what we tried to do here was emulate the way daylight falls into the space by working lighting out in a manner that in the night when you will see again the same suffusion of light into the center. Some more spaces of how the threshold of the spaces internally and externally work. And this is a movie that the clients made for us.
We mostly sleep or take a break. We need a lot. I try to walk the dogs, but you just can't blame us. Our office is such. We're here to work, and sometimes we do. We play FIFA or race a car, but you just can't blame us. Our office is such. Our days start at 12 and nights never end, with the wind so soothing and the place so pleasing. You just can't blame us. Our office is such.
We are Nirvana Films, and we love our new office. Pure production bliss, now in a new outfit.
So that was a lovely film that Nirvana Films made for us, and this was actually while we were going for WAF. This was in 2012. We were nominated and we were awarded this. So we won the WAF small project. So in that year, we were competing against the giants from Australia and US with large commercial buildings. And at that point, I think WAF recognized what this small project could do. And they opened the category called small project with that year. So 2012 was the first year they opened small projects, and Nirvana Films won the small projects award then. This project in the same year won a lot of international global awards, and all these other awards, whether it's the EDC from US, whether it's Future Arc from Singapore. These are all awards for buildings that are categorized under green certification. So it's either a LEED building or anything to do with USGBC, which are green building rating systems. But this building was one of the anomalies in that year. Across the globe, it won for buildings that otherwise are only certified green. This is not a certified green, it's only certified green in your intentions, not in terms of accreditation. So that's what you see, what this sort of a building can do. And after that, I think year by year, a lot of kids from AA, when they go to do their masters in sustainability, will end up taking this building just to audit and see really what is the outcome that this building finally gives. The next project is, again, context and culture, very deeply rooted. This is a hotel in Tirupati. So this came in at a time when this is a group called the Madhwani group who came down to India. They are from East Africa, and they came down to India to put a trail of religious tourist hotels. This was 10 years ago, and when they came to us with a brief that they wanted to build a cookie cutter model of hotels across various different religious sites in the country. Now the sites that they chose were 3 of them. There's Tirupati, Bodh Gaya and Rishikesh. And all of them are culturally and historically very, very, very different. And what we told them is that rather than commissioning us for these projects, let's first show you what we can do with each of these 3 projects, which are so deeply rooted in their culture. Tirupati with Vaishnavism, Bodh Gaya with Buddhism, and Rishikesh with Shaivism. And we showed them the concepts for all of these 3. And that's when they realized that you can't do a cookie cutter model. Everything is inclined towards what you can give based on where it's located, its geography, its culture, and it's the materials that you really get out of that site. So just giving you some of that brief and getting into this project. The project is at the foothill of the Tirumala hills. If one knows what Tirupati's lay of land is, it's the 7 hills of the Saptagiri. And we are at the foothill of one of the hills. What you see on the What you see on the top over here is where the main Venkateshwara temple is, which is at the Tirumala hills. And there's a whole journey, if somebody has ever been to Tirupati, there's a whole journey that you actually take through to reach at the city level. And this is where the toll gate is. Our site was deep inside and a very highly growing urban fabric. And we were at the foothill right at the end. When the site came to us, this was about 10 years ago, there was nothing else and the urban fabric hadn't started to grow at all. So the studies that we had to do was deep-rooted not just in terms of culture, but in terms of how do you see an urban fabric like this grow in the future, and what are you then going to be able to give with a building like this. These are some of the very initial studies. Now there's a route to reach the Tirumala hills which is called Alipri, and that's like a 14-kilometer walk that you can take. And that walk really has all these hints. It is strewn with a lot of ancient temples, and you get the whole hint of what is this temple town really steeped into. And it was steeped into the story of Vishnu and Vishnu's Dashavatara. So the 10 incarnations of Vishnu were all stories that you kind of see woven around this entire temple town. So these were basically notes that we were kind of taking. And for us to start any site, doing those 2 or 3 days of being in that site, being in the context, understanding the geography, understanding the culture, and then coming back to think of anything to do with program and bylaws and all of that is the next part. But the first thing was just to kind of sink in the entire site. Just running through some of the pictures, this is one of the Pushkarnis at the bottom. Before you enter into the temple, a Pushkarni is usually where you wash your feet before you get into a temple, and that's what most of the Hindu temples in the country would have. This is what the typical plan of the Tirumala temple is, very typical of a Hindu temple plan, very highly orthogonal, introverted and circumambulatory. Now these were the hints or clues that we took from the temple. On the left is the Tirumala temple, on the right is the first sketch of the hotel after a few iterations, and what we tried to do was use the principles of the Hindu temple planning and come to a space where geometry was very essential. Circumambulation was an important clue that we took, but of course we were not circumambulating. A hospitality project is very high on its services, and the way movements have to happen, where staff has a dedicated movement, guests and staff movements never collide or never intervene, is very, very important. So how planning then informs, you have certain clues that you take, but planning then further informs a lot of things. So what we ended up doing is, instead of what a Garbhagriha does in the temple with a Mukha Mandap, a Mandap and then a Garbhagriha, and then you circumambulate around this whole inner gateway that you see in a temple, what we were doing it in a manner that would suit the program of the project. What we had to the right of this site is a very noisy water park. That's the north where the hills are. And this on the south and the west was a growing fabric of the neighborhood, which hadn't even started when we did this building. By the time we finished this building, this entire neighborhood became a highly, highly dense residential area. So what we were clear about was that while you're designing a hotel like this, introverted became a very key aspect on how you create your views internally and ensure that your gaze lines, when you're actually working out of your guest rooms, you have one side, you have this beautiful reserve forest to the north, so you enjoy rooms there, but what do you do on the other side? You create your own views and you have that under your control. So that's what the design does. The design has an absolutely central cafe which is in the middle of a water body, so that was an analogy we took from the Pushkarni, and that's how we moved further ahead on this. This is what the master plan is. It's about a 3.25 acre site. It's kind of a city hotel, takes up a lot of ground coverage and opens up a lot in the center. Still about a 33% ground coverage. I'm giving you these numbers also so that you understand what the mass and void at the lower level is when you actually take a building like this, where the guest block, which is right at the back, which you'll see in this section, is 5 floors high, while everything else, as the forefront is much lower. So how do you control the layering of volumes? That's the section that you'll see. You'll see on the left side, which is to the north, is the reserve forest and the guest block. Right at the start is the public block. You have a walkway that takes you to the guest block, and then to engage along that walkway, there's just a lot that happens along this side, which I'll just move in after a couple of slides. So this is how it looks. You have the central water body with this all-day dining cafe, and you have the guest block right at the back. A lot of colors in this hotel is inspired by actually what you see in the sanctum of the Balaji temple, which is the Venkateshwara temple. So it's crazy to go to Tirupati and actually go in that crazy line just to get that microsecond of a view of the Lord, and you don't know what's going on. And what that view is, of course, it's astonishing, it's very powerful, it completely transforms you in your thought. And that was a lot of learnings that we actually took from there on how, after that arduous journey of going into the temple, you want to come and stay and rest in a hotel, which is finally something to do with serenity, something to do with nature, something to do with calm, and not what you have experienced in the temple. So that was also something which was the thoughts that were getting distilled while you were doing the design. So some of the pictures of how these spaces interact with each other. We have 2 restaurants. One of this is the Thali restaurant, caved in within that entire block. I mentioned to you all earlier, on the eastern side was a water park, so the plan automatically had to make sure that everything to do with the back of the house services, which is the nerve center of a hotel with the kitchen, goes into that side where the voice and the noise kind of gets controlled. These are some of the crafts that we actually have, like a story panel talking about the Dashavatar, and I'm now going to go into what the Dashavatar story is. So what you saw is architecture was inspired by the planning and the entire interiors of the hotel. So all these projects that you see, we do architecture and interiors, and it's a part of the way the practice works. And what you see over here is the concept of Dashavatar was actually imbibed into public areas. Now some of them may seem very literal, some of them are at an emotional level and a connection at a psychological level. So very simple things like Matsya, which is the first avatar, is a very direct correlation to what the pool court is or the pool is. Kurma is the second avatar, which is an amphibian. And that's where transformation happens. So what we did was took the word transformation and actually used that in the reception. So when you enter into a hotel like this, the first space that you interface with is when you have to check in yourself, and that's where the analogy of the kurma comes. Some very other obvious ones is Rama is the social man, so celebratory, and that becomes the banquet hall. Krishna, who's the most versatile out of all the avatars, becomes the thali restaurant, which you just saw in the earlier slide, and that basically serves you thalis from all across the country. Getting into what the Lotus Cafe is, so again using symbology and using the aspect of symbology to be converted into a form is very important. And what we've done over here is taken the symbol of the lotus, converted into a very highly geometric form, and moved that into a space like this. Now what you'll see here is a GIF of how the Lotus Cafe gets constructed. It's a completely steel structure with a shuttering in corrugated sheet with very thin 50 mm thick. This will go in loop, so I'll keep speaking so that you can get a hint of what this does. So what you see on top is just 50 mm thick screed concrete. It's something like what ferrocrete does, and the lightness of it is felt on the outside. A cafe of this sort is high on its services, right from the works of air conditioning to fire services to music to LV, which is low voltage lines, cameras, everything has to go inside. So what you see in some of those images is what the inner skin, if the outer skin was a tessellated 8 faceted numbers, the inner skin became 16, and that's how you kind of see all these spaces getting formed. And that's what the Lotus Cafe looks like. So very light steel structure. This is the section that makes it much more clearer for you, that you have a very light structure where you leave the shuttering and you cast with that 50 mm thick screed concrete, and you create a second skin at the bottom, and you put all your services inside that second skin and make this second double tessellated roof at the bottom, and that's a completely, it's a vineyard ceiling. So that's another drawing which will make it very clear for you. Now these things become our tools, because what happens is when you're working on these projects, the practice believes in a very good set of GFC drawings that goes out to site. But whatever you do, your PMCs who are handling these projects on site at times are not on the loop all the time. And what makes it difficult is that the final guy or the team of guys or girls or women who are working this out, they need a visual understanding. They don't understand the language English when you're writing drawings with many specifications on it, and those callouts don't work for them. So you need something visual. So what we have done with this one is we made a physical model, which was a removable model, showing you all the V columns as a structural system, showing you the layer of the bottom, showing the layer of the top, and actually left that on site. And did a workshop with the whole site team who's going to take responsibility of building this building. And with that workshop, what happens is it gets ingrained in their heads. They know exactly what is the intent of this, and at what point you cannot afford to dilute the intents that the design firm is asking for, and then everybody aligns themselves to make sure that they are able to give this. So these are some of the drawings which just help explain things better. Some more pictures of the Lotus Cafe earlier. I'm just going to go through one of this very quickly. This is basically just to show you how the conversion of Krishna into the thali restaurant, and what's the mood board and the palette that really came about. Highly symbolic, lots of iconography, lots of conversion of that iconography into the space, and how does all of this symbology come into the space emotionally. So that's where the thali restaurant is. It's at the threshold of that entire wall where you have the water body, and what you see at the threshold is then this layering of all the spaces beyond. Some more aspects of how we used craft completely in this space. This is Tirupati. We had very active crafts. Kalamkari is in a little village called Sri Kalahasti, which is just 20 kilometers away from the site. And Mangalgiri, Telangana and Andhra Pradesh are steeped in their crafts. Handicrafts are a big one. And what we did through this entire storytelling on what you see in this structure and this building is every single aspect of design, whether it's a carpet, whether it's a handle, whether it's an artwork, everything was a derivative from the story of the Dashavatar, and I'm just going to show you all some slides on how the conversion of that happened without getting into too many details. So this is basically the star, and we use the Kalamkari tree to painted by the Kalamkari artist from Sri Kalahasti to create that mood there. Now these are the 10 avatars, and we use the 10 avatars in artworks, and we big time use them as handles to get into each public space. Each of our public spaces were large double height doors, double leaf doors, and what we created out of this was Dokra is also another craft that actually runs across the whole eastern belt of the country, right from Maharashtra till Telangana. And we use Dokra as a craft to make this possible. And what you see over here is a lot of artworks that goes into the space and a lot of handles that go as your first interface into any space. So these are large. These are like, if you see that Matsya handle, it's 5 feet tall. And if you see that Lotus Cafe handle, it's about 2.5 feet, square of that size. So all of this just takes a lot of collaboration, a lot of people involved in this. We were working with a craft mediator firm called Baya, who was facilitating this and really working at the grassroots level with the artisans. Very fortunate to say that our first site visit in KRBI in 97-98 was to Bastar, to Kondagaon, and we stayed with Jaidev Bagel in his house. And all these that you see here is produced by the master craftsman from the same village called Suresh Varmare, who has done all of this. So it just takes a lot, and they have never ever done this. Bastar handicrafts are more for little figurines, and they've never done something which is engineered to be a handle that is going to be pushed and pulled all the time. It's used on both sides. This is on front side. The same thing happens on the back side. So you can imagine the whole lever mechanism that both have to connect into each other to make sure that everything is engineered well enough. So that's Tirupati. Again, Tirupati won us the UNESCO award at the pre-Versailles, so it was for the whole building and for the Lotus Cafe. These are just some memories after the project was done. I think for me it's very important that while you're doing these projects, you need immense support from your family. And this is my daughter on the left, which is of course 7 years ago, my family and my mother. And while you're doing all this, your support from your family is absolutely essential. And this is irrespective of whether you are a woman or whether you're a man, you need that support. You can't do this without having that sort of a support. So this is very important to just share. The second hotel that we did for them is in Bodh Gaya, and Tirupati went so successful, and even through the pandemic, Tirupati was at 95% occupancy, that Tirupati was able to fund Bodh Gaya. So even in terms of the economics of how one builds or the client builds, it's very important for the clients also to take those steps that they're able to co-fund the project from a previous project. So Bodh Gaya is of course in the land of Buddha. The clientele is largely the Southeast Asians, more than even what you have in India. And what you are looking at is a place where direct connections of flights from all other Buddhist world places are more direct than what we had. Only now you have a flight to Gaya. Till 3 years ago, you did not have flights to Gaya. You always had to do Patna and then drive through the entire road from Patna to Gaya, which is a very, very highly Naxal area. So just saying how economies of scales have changed and how projects, when they are coming into these kind of areas, how they change even the livelihood and the way demographics really start changing. So this is deep-rooted in Gaya, and of course, the heritage of India and the Magad kingdom is really where you had the best of architecture and structures. Some of these images are from Nalanda. And what you see now is, hopefully Bihar is resurrecting themselves and making what it used to be culturally, historically, and architecturally. So again, similarly, all the inputs from what you gain from the site, like you saw in Tirupati, it was about the temple town. This is again about the Mahabodhi temple and all the context around. A lot of architecture that you see around this area is very highly nuanced in its arches, in its vaults, and these were very direct architectural references that we actually took to imbibe into the architectural vocabulary of the building. So what you see over here is Bodh Gaya as a building is very subtle, very serene. We did explore a lot to do with how we could build with brick, but I think we were very clear that when it comes to the visual texture of a building like this, we did not want something which was very busy. And the second reason to not build as a load-bearing structure with brick was we fall under the earthquake zone, and load-bearing structures was not something that could have made it feasible. So what we've done in the building, a lot of pictures that you'll see further ahead, is it's a simple RCC building, but a lot of corbelling has been used using the module of the brick. So this is a resort typology, again same client, same operator. Site is much larger, it's about 4.5 acres. And the rooms are spread out. The entire thing is much more spread out, unlike Tirupati, which is more of a city hotel, and you saw the guest room rising up. This is where we separated out all the public areas, separated it with a whole water body, which is a rainwater harvesting pond, and on the other side is the guest block. Again, what you see with hospitality, what's super crucial is how services work and how planning works. No interweaving of collision of guest and staff is okay at any point. So when you're kind of working these plans, that's constantly what you need to make sure that even from the kitchen when food has to go to the room, how do you make sure that that is from a path that is unhindered and doesn't hinder the guest movements. So what you see in this section over here is using those nuances from the architecture of the region and using the bold as a language. Bodh Gaya is again very hot and dry. What it needed was to make sure that the thermal mass of the envelope of the building makes it comfortable. Of course, hotels are air conditioned, but there are a lot of parts of this hotel that you'll see further ahead, like in Tirupati also, the whole connecting walkway is not air conditioned. A lot of challenges happened with the operators and hoteliers to even get this idea through, because they are only used to understanding that you only walk through air-conditioned spaces. So even at Tirupati, it was not an easy one to get them to walk 64 meters across a water body. And for us, it was very clear, you're going to get a highly shaded space, lots of engagement with the water body on one side. You won't realize that 60 meters at all. At points, you have to go and work these struggles out to be able to prove, because architecture is not like I can give you a storyboard like advertisements do. I can give you a visual. Here, I have to feel it. And the emotion of the space on how you feel it can only come once you've built it. I can do mock-ups for 1:1 scales, but I can't prove that 64 meters is going to be convenient to you other than simulations and models. So it's a very, I feel we're all blessed to be able to give this back to the community and back to people, because what you create out of these spaces are finally emotions, and what you can feel out of these pieces is really what matters to a lot of people and how it changes and transforms people. So coming back to what this wall does, it is basically a mask that's created to thermally insulate the space and give you much more comfortable spaces. What this also helps us with, if you have air-conditioned spaces also, your heat gain into the space reduces drastically, which means your tonnage of air conditioning reduces and your energy guzzling aspects of electricity reduces. These are some of the pictures of how we've been navigating this entire thing. So maybe I should just go back to the plan and just show you this bit. So can you see these streets? These streets are totally not air conditioned. This is a street which is open to sky, and you have the cafe over here and you have the pool court over here. So when guests are walking, they come into the reception area over here. This is all the back of the house areas behind the cafe, the kitchen, all of the kitchen services, laundry, blah blah blah. When guest walks, they walk actually through either a covered pathway, non-air conditioned, or through the street with a bodhi tree right here, and you walk through these open spaces. It's fine for a resort property, even through the little rains that happen in Bodh Gaya, to actually be able to take the umbrellas and go through, because this is all about the experience that you have in a space like this. It's not a covered pathway. So just pointing that out before you all see the next set of images. So that's what the courtyard is, and you have the streets covered streets on both the sides. The language of the cobble, the language of the keyhole windows, and the language of the way light pierces in, and the magic of shadow and light that gets created in the space is absolutely magical. What you see on the roof over here is concrete tiles which are used in 5 paired layers. And the reason to do this is again to add to the thermal insulation. And there's a little impact story that was done with this one. This one was actually done by engaging with almost 12 villages and 26 potter families to create millions of these bricks to be able to do what we have done in terms of thermally insulate this, as well as give them the employment through this. The market would sell this at a particular cost, maybe 8 rupees per tile. We were able to give them almost 9.5 rupees directly with no middlemen in the bargain to take any cuts, and this was all directly with the potter families. I think we have few images to share. This is the experience from the inside. This is the reception in the night. This is what I was talking about, the magic of light with the keyhole windows. This is a pool court. So what you see here is the pool. What you see beyond that is that walkway, and right beyond that is the street which is open to sky. These are some of the images of the guest block and the connecting walkways that are bridges over the water body. So that's the guest block, which is a G+1 structure, a vaulted roof experience on the inside, on the upper level. I'm going to focus on the architecture of this, so I'm just going to share some of the ways in which this happened. So again, vaults were created with, what you see over here is again a lot of engineering that goes into it to try and create dies to make sure that when you're repeating the number of volts that are there, there's always an economy of scales that you're working with. You can't have all volts casted in the same time, producing those many die cast shuttering. So what you're doing is you're planning the logistics of a site also in a manner that you make sure that economy of scales work. You make X number of modules and you work the logistics and sequence of sites such that you can avail of repetitions and you don't waste material. So what you see on the inside is a lot of colored concrete, a lot of experiments done with colored concrete to get to the right color. These were some of the mock-ups that happened. This is all stained concrete, casted the way it is. And what you see over here is without rendering, this is what the outcome of the vaults are. And this is the story of the potter engagement that I spoke about earlier. And this is how you see it on the site. The parallel story, like the Dashavatar was the story in the Tirupati hotel, the parallel story for interiors over here was the Vajradhatu Mandala, which is one of the most important mandala in Buddhism, and how that was used to again correlate with spaces. There are 5 mudras associated with this mandala, and how each of those 5 mudras were correlated with space. I'm not going to get into the details of this, just showing you how the practice works in terms of weaving a story and being able to take that story till the end to transform into space. So very simple things like what you'll see is Bhumi Sparsha is one of the mudras and one of the aspects of the mandala, and that's a direct correlation to what a spa and a pool court does. The Varada is basically giving, so that's the cafe. And similarly, again, symbology, colors, cardinal directions, and understanding of all this on how that amalgamates to make that space. This is a video which will give you some hints on some of the internal spaces as well. That's the vault on the upper level and the rooms. That's the reception area. So when you walk into the reception, this is what you see as the street. That's that magic of light that I was talking about through these streets. That's the cafe, the Varada cafe. Again, you see the vault exposed and left as it is. So you can imagine in the Lotus Cafe, you saw something which was highly integrated with services and the roof. Here you see the roof exposed, so all services had to come from the side. So that's another level of integration that you end up doing to make sure that you're able to see the real skin. That's the reception again. And what you see there, that's the Vajradharma Mandala as the information panel, right, when you enter into the hotel. So again, just to refocus back on collaborations and what the web of communication to make these kind of projects possible is that it's all of these. You know, it's the architect. In our case, we are the architect and the interior designers for projects like this, so we end up becoming the center because we are the ones who are holding everybody else. And that's the web that really, really gets woven to make these projects possible. This is Vaishali, Shimul and Roshni who were responsible for this project, and internally, the way we collaborate internally also is we are 4 partners, me and 3 of them whom you see on the screen. Roshni to the right is the interior designer, so we internally collaborate where projects of Tirupati was done by one team itself, so we were not at that point, 10 years ago with internal collaborations, but now we've reached a stage where a lot of internal collaborations happen. So Bodh Gaya is a result of Vaishali being the key for the architecture and Roshni being the key for the interiors, and 2 teams, we work as 3 teams in the office, and these 3 teams interweave on various different aspects when you are co-creating and co-collaborating within the firm. Again, Bodh Gaya has won a lot of awards, and Bodh Gaya actually opened up just before the pandemic, so it's now starting to catch up because of all the routes being shut from the Southeast Asian world. It's now kind of really doing well. The next project I'm going to share again very quickly is what I've tried to do today over here is talk about 2 focus aspects. One is collaboration, one is building in a very rich cultural aspect. So what I've covered earlier is an office building to hospitality typology. This is an apartment building in Chennai. This will just give you a wide spectrum of how we as a firm work and what are the possibilities that architecture gives you, and it's not single method. Every single site demands a different approach, and every single problem demands a different solution as well. So this is a project in Chennai in an area called Boat Club. A very who's who of Chennai would live in this area, and the challenge for this one was very sorry for going so detailed on the earlier ones. I'll just run through quickly on these. So what this, just to tell you what the brief was this is an old client for whom we build houses, we build factories and we build offices, and they came in for, they've become a development company who's been building in the outskirts of Chennai, but they're building for MIG, so large number of mid-income housing. This was a building that they wanted to keep for themselves as a pilot luxury project that they could rent out. So what this is a apartment which has apartment building that has 4 duplex. We were given an open brief to create the brief internally. They all wanted was a 4,500 square feet each apartment. Chennai scales are very different from Bombay, so apartment scales are very, very different when it comes to even a normal 2 BHK in Chennai would be a minimum 1,000 square feet as opposed to our 600 square feet. So I'm talking about the carpet area. So scales are very different. Bombay works on a very different footage. So a site again, which is a southeast southeast corner site. This is working. I'll just skip that. So what we have is a southeast corner site. Again, the north and the west is kind of other neighbors. What we did was a Rubik's cube, interlocking each apartment in a manner that every apartment has its own central entrance. The neighbor doesn't look into your entrance. So what you see as 1 is basically where, so 1 over here is the public spaces of apartment 1, and 2 over here is the private spaces of apartment 1. You enter from the second floor and go down. So that's the way it happens between segregation of public and private. The brief again was to design a building which is fully air conditioned. I think we were very clear that the brief came to us with saying that Chennai is full of mosquitoes. We need all sorts of protection. The heat is too much. We do not want wind to come into the space. We want them all air conditioned, and these are spaces that will go to be rented to CEOs of major companies. They are paying that sort of rental. So it comes from a developer's point of view, right? So what do you do with it? What we give them is a building that's fully breathing, completely cross-ventilated, ensuring all the orientation is met with, and you get your air conditioning as well. So you are at your choice on how you want to use a building like this. So we have a central atrium in the building, and the central atrium is totally non-air conditioned. It's mechanically ventilated so that it creates this whole convection and is very comfortable to be able to walk through. It is a social space that we wanted to create, that when you have 4 of these very illustrious family who wants to come and live or rent their spaces out here, you do need a feeling of community that will still come in a space like this, and that was very important for us to create the staircase such that you're able to use the staircase, you're able to use this central public space to be able to understand your neighbors better rather than being isolated in a building like otherwise, where you don't know your neighbors. Chennai bylaws were very, very critical, and how we had to build with them is actually really use balconies in a way that we make them terraces and take them into the FSI calculations. Heat was a major aspect, so we have actually created a second skin by reducing the thermal mass of the building by the envelope that you see. The facade was actually treated with many different nuances of what you see over here is one of it. You have a beautiful rain tree. This is a bedroom on the first floor. You don't want to disrupt your visual of the rain tree, but you also want to bring in the wind. So what you do is the series of little louvers that actually blocks away the privacy, but at the same time brings in the wind. That's where the building is in the corner. That's what you see in the night. It's glowing like a lantern. That's the southwest corner. This is how you see the balconies are going in and out, and you can use them as little coffee table spaces. These are the internal images of the central staircase. Some more images. This is seen from the bottom to the top. It's a skylight and a skywell that completely suffuses light into the center. Some more images of the staircase. This is the duplex staircase that happens within the space. The spaces are full of light. And what we did with the bathrooms was completely reversed it and completely mellowed it down with a contrasting color. The kitchens, we did not do the fit furnishing and furniture because these were all rental apartments. So what we did was hard finishes and a warm shell which is completely finished. The terrace is used, you'll see in the video next, the terrace is used for a lot of other functions. two other projects, but I'm just thinking of skipping it so that we can have, I can just very quickly just show the images. This is a hospital that we finished in Alibag last year. It's close to a steel plant. And what you saw, the site was like a slag-filled barren land. Today what we've converted it into is a microclimate of highly biodiverse environment for healing, and what we believe this hospital is designed for is nature nurtures the healing aspect of what a hospital needs to do. So unlike any other urban hospital, what you'll see over here is a lot of balconies, a lot of verandas, a lot of seating spaces. Looking at the way Alibag and the torrential rains are, a lot of sloping roofs, verandas, balconies. This is the section of the north. We also have balconies given to every single room, whether it's the ward or whether it's the private rooms. Unlike any other hospital, this hospital only uses 20% of air conditioning for only critical areas. Everything else is naturally ventilated. None of the major areas, it's a 100-bedded hospital. Out of that, almost about 50 people are in the wards and then spread across various different areas, whether it's critical areas or maternity wing. And hospital is, I think, the highest degree of services that goes in beyond a hospitality project. And what you end up doing is, it's to the T. It's another level altogether. Very complex. So what is very important is adjacencies of how you segregate emergency to staff to patient movements, and that becomes the crux of how the planning happens. This is just to show how the land actually completely makes the overall land pervious and retains water and harvest rain. These are little cafe terraces which is open to the admin staff. Some of the views from the south. Some of the views from the south, again using a lot of these waiting spaces that you see up and down. Internally, how we made it really humane, and we used a lot of art over here, and we've used Gond as an artwork in very highly massive scales. The reason to use Gond and not use anything from Maharashtra, we thought this very carefully and so thought, Wadi was not the style that would actually evoke the emotion of calm that you need in a space like this. While the Gond artists are able to do this very naturally, where they use nuances from nature to actually convert them into simple gestures which are highly, indicating compassion, empathy and care. These are the waiting areas, some more images, consultancy rooms, the staircases. It's called the JSW Sanjeevani Hospital, so it was very important for us to get Sanjeevani and the story of Sanjeevani. So there's a Kalamkari artwork, some more. So these are the direct balconies that you see. So when you're recuperating, you can actually go and use those spaces, do those little walks, because always a hospital corridor is just so busy with people moving, nurse stations, food trolleys, that you don't get that space. If I'm able to start walking, I can do that through these continuous balconies. Yeah. And the last is a museum that we are doing in Ahmedabad right now. This is an under construction project. So I don't have final pictures, but what I want to focus on is how we built this museum around the existing trees. It's going to hold the most exquisite collection from giant heritage in the world. Our building is ready. We started it just when the pandemic started, managed to build it through. It's a public space for the city of Ahmedabad, where we've lifted the entire building off the ground, so non-ticketed spaces are available for anybody to come and use the space at the bottom, and only ticketed galleries happen from the first level. Some more images of it, some of the construction of how the trees were saved, and this is of the building, how it is right now. And the story of, these are just showing some of the collections of what's going to be housed. Again, there's a story behind it, I won't get into it. It's on the concept of Navpal. Some of the internal gallery views. I do want to mention this one because this is a very interesting one, where the museum actually has Akbar's Farman, and the Farman is from the time when you have pollution going on, and he gave this Farman to actually not have those areas culling animals. So this Farman that the museum has is an original Farman that actually talks about no culling of animals during that holy period of Paryushan. Yeah, so all this began here, right on the studio above. This is me in the first year studio, and I think collaboration starts immediately from the second semester and what you really do together. This was the first exhibition that we had, and this is the first, maybe the jury publicly that I gave. This is a happy bunch of us after the jury. You can see Gaurav there. And this is what we created right over here. So collaboration is where I'm going to end this act. This is our whole batch in Kerala. This is actually Raji's house. We had gone to Parur in Kerala. Same batch again. And then what I'm really focusing here is how the journey or the future of architecture is with collective practices, and that is where we are. We are a partnership firm today. 4 of us run this firm, and I think it's a very, very, very joyous movement with the entire team that we have who create these spaces. Thank you.
Thank you, Sarika, for this wonderful session. Shravan is our discussant for today. Shravan, if you could please come up here.
Thank you so much for such a wonderful talk. I think it was great to see the way practice sort of responds to the site, the client's needs, the program, even ideas of culture, so how it responds to the user, and even seeing the sort of building respond to itself with the details and the sort of delicate craftsmanship involved and how the interiors connect with the larger form overall. I think it's quite thought out, very thorough work that it's been done. So it's great seeing it. We've got a few students here, either on the 4th year or in the 5th year, sort of starting their professional careers. So it's sort of a question on behalf of all of them. Did you imagine?
And I think that's what most of us do aspire to. But I think when I joined the firm was really young. We were only 4 of us. And the kind of trust Shimul as a person gave, and the family that we grew into, I think all of us had these shared beliefs and these values that all of us shared. Before me was Vaishali, who was there a year before me, but Vaishali is 4 batches senior to me. And I think it was also at a time where Shimul was with very young kids who were growing. So in a way, it was also that aspect that we had to pull ourselves to really make things happen. Now, when you are in that kind of a setup where you're being able to give that freedom and that thought leadership that you can imbibe into right from the very young aspect, I think it just became project after project, scale after scale, typology after typology. Yeah, it just feels like 21 years is really long. But what you do in those, because architecture takes an average of 4 years to really produce anything, it doesn't feel that long. In hindsight, yeah, that's what I would feel. And I think architecture needs you to be able to understand what you want to do, and if you really want to do this towards the larger cause of difference it makes to people, it doesn't matter whether you are a firm that you open for yourself or whether you are a contributor in a firm and then become somebody who who is running the firm. I think for us right from the start, it was like my PP Viva, which was after the 5th month. I had a project to myself. The first brief that I went and took, my first project was in Bombay, in Royal Palms. It was building for this doctor couple, completely skewed, especially the doctor. He's late, Dr. Pankaj Naram, who's no more there. But absolutely crazy in his thoughts and his affirmation to nature. And that was mind-boggling for me to go alone on that first meeting in the 3rd year of my internship as 21, 22-year-old, to go and take a brief from a client. So you can imagine if that sort of trust is shown through your internship. It was also the circumstances, and I think we were able to pull ourselves to really Go out there and make things happen. The questioning, we did not have the internet at that time to really get answers for, which means you had to open Mackey even in the first 4 years of your practice to really see how typical details happen, and then you really go out of your way to think about innovating those details. So I think times are very difficult. Right now, access to information is so easy that even our span of attention is lowered. I'd say maybe today it doesn't happen, but the real focus on this whole thing was, it is the future of collective practices. And it really doesn't matter whether you are opening your own firm or whether you are in a setup that you want to grow with. That's where the future really lies, because there's just so much to offer, and if you want to build in the manner that you want to build, you need to learn the right way. And I think it just becomes, it's important even if you want to open your own firm. Please do see through a project, whether it takes 2 years or whether it takes 4 years. See it from start to end, so you know the nuances of practice, right from not just the design, but the economy of the project, how you build these projects. Don't go into jumping into opening practices without having seen something that you believe in, and you believe in that process and the outcome. So yeah, that's important.
Thank you so much. I think it's been great looking at your personal journey, the journey of the firm, and everyone at the threshold of the practice, of practicing here. Maybe one day we'll find a place in the field just like you did. So I think we can open up to questions if anyone has any.
Thank you.
Does anybody have any questions?
Hi, with so many of your firm's projects which are like based in different states and different areas, how do you coordinate with the contractors and the people on site, as well as get those experience incorporated as a part of your project, because they have knowledge specific to that particular region?
Very good question. So, like we said, GFC has become the lifeline of how we coordinate. And like in Nirvana, I have a very dear friend who became a dear friend now, who was somebody who started the firm called Play Architecture. Now, of course, Senthil runs it. And Poonam is the one who we identified as the PMC. So she was in Bangalore, and she was the one who would go to site as often as needed. And I would be there like every month or so. And when I'm there with her, there would be a lot of collaborative work that we would do. We would kind of, collect things so that you have mock-ups in place, you're able to give your answers on scales and proportions and operations. So it works very differently for every project. Now you have PMCs to a level that they're able to understand. There is somebody who reads your drawings. You need to have them to ask RFIs, which are basically requests for information. There are workshops that we do with the whole team that is going to take on construction. Whether it is even the head mason, even that person needs to be involved in that workshop, so that we are able to translate to them what we have imagined, and they are very careful about not diluting the purpose or the intent, because then when you have to course correct, it's very difficult. Of course, we've had to do that in many projects. That becomes yet another exercise, but a good project where you have a very good project manager who's involved in the project and is able to translate all of this is a project that can be as successful. So for us, consultant workshops at the integration level, whether it's with your structural consultant, MEP, landscape lighting, key. Like, you cannot do distant integration with these consultants. You have to be locked in a room, do day-wise workshops so that you get to the same page. The same thing goes with even construction teams on site. Once they get the intent, then you're able to do things long distance. That's not a problem at all. And your drawings speak for what you need, and then we make as often as needed the visits. Like for the museum project now, we are going to start with the exhibition design, and we are the exhibition designers for it as well. So the client has demanded for our team to be on site full time. So, and this client knows how particular we are about every single joinery and junction, because this is a long association with this client. And there is no trust that he wants to give on a PMC, so he demanded that out of us. So now we're putting a team who can be in Ahmedabad for the next 12 months to make sure that it happens the way we are envisaging it. Yeah, so it changes, but you make it happen the way you want it to happen.
Any other questions? Okay. On that note, we can end the session now. Thank you, Sarika.
Thank you, everyone.